it's true because I remember when I was like in high school, this is, back in the 90s, early 90s, at some point, like even way back then, the computer systems were getting synchronized where if you got marked absent in a class, an automated phone call would right away go out to your parents saying, hey, your kid's not in school today. Just want to make sure that's what you knew.
And we are live. Once again, this is the Solvable Mysteries Podcast, episode number 10. This is a milestone episode for this podcast. My name is Juras. As usual, I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Glenn. How are you feeling today, man?
I am doing great. I'm really excited to talk about this case because this has been another one of those ones I've followed literally for, close to 10 years now.
Oh, really?
Excited.
Have you?
Yeah. I mean, I think the case isn't quite 10 years old, but I feel like there's a certain event that happens in this case where I remember suddenly perking up because it went from like kind of what looked like a normal missing persons case to some infighting amongst the victims of the case. So that was where I was like, oh, I need to look at this a little more closely, and that's where it just got more and more bizarre.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
I have to agree with you on that one. So without any further ado, today's case is the disappearance of Kyron Horman. So Kyron Richmond Horman disappeared from Skyline Elementary School in Portland on June 4th, 2010. You are seeing, I'm talking to the viewers, you are seeing this elementary school right now on the Google images. Right, so on the day of his disappearance, Kyron was taken to school by his then stepmother, Terri, who then stayed with him while he attended a science fair. Terri stated that she left the school at around 8:45 a.m. and that she last remembered seeing Kyron walking down the hall to his first class. However, Kyron did not attend his first class, and he was never to be seen again. So, yeah, I guess that's the brief version of what actually happened. Any initial take on the case from you, Glenn?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty odd to have a kid disappear from the middle of a school. So I think that was one of the first weird things about this is, usually when someone disappears, it's either before school or after school or from their house, like the John Bonet thing looked like it was going to be one of those.
Yeah.
But this is like so strange because seemingly this child disappeared from someplace where there were a lot of witnesses. So like this is where it really requires some deep digging.
Yeah, another thing we have to mention is like this picture is the last picture taken by Terri, who actually posted this picture. The stepmother Terri, who was coincidentally also the main suspect in this case. She posted this picture afternoon on the same day that Kyron went missing, and I believe this picture was taken an hour before he was last
Yeah,
seen.
yeah, it's like literally the last photo, at least anybody knows of of Kyron. So, yeah, the whole story is, this is where it gets convoluted. Is the school had a science fair, and Kyron was one of the participants, and his stepmother says that there was a little bit of a miscommunication from the school about when the projects were being presented and when it was time to pick up the projects, and etc. And I can say as a parent, I'm dealing with this right now, where there are like a lot of, you
Yeah.
can't even imagine, it's so obnoxious for something that's like a project for your kid, but like these projects make a lot of let's say work in the household, and you end up kind of scheduling your life around your child's science project. Anyway, that was supposedly the reason why this is what Kyron's father and Terry's husband or ex-husband says, that she had actually explicitly asked to use the pickup truck out of their two cars. So normally she uses another car, I guess it was a compact. He had a pickup truck. She asked to borrow the pickup truck because they were taking home the project that day. Now, this comes into some kind of significance later, because there's some dispute about whether she did ask him that, because there's an email from her later in the day asking the teacher when you're supposed to pick up the project. But like Kane's whole point was, well, why were you driving the truck then in the morning if you didn't think you were taking home the project that day? Yeah, so but then someone else could say, well, gosh, a truck sure is handy for handling,
a body,
yeah, a body, a big bulky thing. So then, just is it okay if you like, I'll do a quick kind of overview of the whole event, then we can kind of start picking this apart. So, just rewinding, Kyron Richard Horman was born in September 9th, 2002 in Portland, Oregon, to Desiree Young and Kane Horman. Kane was an engineer for Intel. Unfortunately for Kyron, it sounds like his family life was unraveling while he was still in utero. So before he was even born, Desiree and Kane divorced, citing irreconcilable differences. And then just coincidentally, during this breakup, Kane starts dating this woman, Terri Moulton, who's a substitute teacher from the area. And they eventually get married, and they also, in fact, have a child before all this goes down, or right around. I'm sorry, it happened right afterwards.
Right. Yep.
So, what happens is, as we mentioned, she takes Kyron to the science fair. They make kind of a big show. I think this is one of those things where it's like, gosh, they sure did seem to go out of their way to interact with people. But, obviously, if you go to your kid's thing, you are going to say hi to other parents and staff and stuff. So, yeah, they go and they take this picture, the infamous picture, the last picture. And, what a cute kid. Looks like the kid from Jerry Maguire.
He actually reminds me a little bit the Doolittle kid, if you know what I'm saying, like the story with the kid and like the little mouse or something like that. I can't remember exactly the plot of that movie. Right. He was really, he seemed like a really good kid, like a really well, mannered kid. At least he seemed smart as well. He put a lot of work into that science fair project, I could tell. And another thing to mention is quickly, before you continue on giving us the breakdown, there's a lot of people in this science fair, so it's strange that no one actually saw what happened. I mean, but continue. I guess we'll discuss it later.
No, it is a good point, because it's like, I mean, some of this is already weird to me, because no school that I've been to, either as a parent or as an attendee, has had like this weird free form, like just come to the science fair whenever. Usually you go look at the science fair either in designated times of the day where the whole school is out looking at it. Like when my kid was in preschool, they had science fair, but we actually came at like 3 o'clock or whatever time it was to come watch it. Yeah, it's a little weird, but I guess every school does their own thing, and it sounds like there was already a miscommunication between Terri and the school staff about when the science fair happened, because apparently the kids had already given their presentation, so maybe that excuses why she seems kind of off schedule with this. But it is worth considering how convenient it is in some ways. So yeah, they take him back. She says the last time she saw Kyron, he was walking down the hall towards his classroom, and then no one has ever seen him again. And she claims that a couple other kids saw him in that intervening period going down the hall, but really I don't see any evidence for that in the Wikipedia. We have this interesting dynamic of a lot of statements being made after the fact, and just because somebody goes on a TV show, like for instance Terri went on Dr. Phil to defend herself, so we have some clips from that. That doesn't mean that it's true. That just because somebody says something on TV show, that's not in a court of law. So the person can make up all manner of statements to protect themselves in the aftermath and not face any consequences unless they go on the stand.
Right. I mean, another thing that is interesting to me, that this school is smaller than I thought initially while researching this case. I sort of imagined it being a lot bigger. I mean, maybe this is how schools are in the States, especially in more rural areas. I mean, this is like a suburb of Portland, wouldn't you say? Right.
Yeah. It's
so it's really small, I guess. I mean, I guess that would make sense. The fact that nobody really spotted Kyron leaving.
Yes, so that's right away we get into some weirdness. So, if we go down this timeline, so the Terri says she dropped him off, sent him off to class. As far as she knew in her mind, she says he was in school that day. So she proceeded to have, I guess, what was a normal day for herself. So I laugh a little bit because it's a very Oregon day. My mom's family is from Oregon. So that state, and from the Pacific Northwest. And then some of the places she mentions, like right after school, she went to 2 different Fred Meyer grocery stores. So Fred Meyer is sort of like, before Target was so widespread in the U.S., Fred Meyer's is sort of like the Target / Walmart of the Pacific Northwest. It's a pretty popular chain. So it's a like a pretty normal retail establishment to be going to. So she went to 2 of them supposedly, which I assume she'll show up in some sort of surveillance footage for those 2 places, given all those.
She had, right? I mean, she had.
She must have. Otherwise, I feel like they would have picked that right away. They would have picked that hole in her story. So
no, like I've actually, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like I've actually read somewhere that they actually have footage, and she has been spotted in both stores.
Okay.
Right. Great. So she was spotted. Yeah. Because thinking about it right now, if she just sort of falsified that whole story, and they wouldn't have any evidence of that, they would have immediately, picked her up and stuff like that, because those stores have 24/7, hours a day security footage, right?
Yeah, they have cameras everywhere for every possible angle because of shoplifting.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
So she was probably, it probably was pretty easy to verify that she was there. But then it's also worth pointing out, gosh, somebody sure went to some extra effort as we go through the rest of her day to kind of provide herself an alibi. So, yeah, she goes to these 2 different stores between 10:10 to 11:39 a.m. And then she says also in that period, so between 10:10 and 11:39 a.m., besides going to both of the stores, so we don't have an exact time, she says she was driving her infant daughter around town to try to soothe the toddler's earache, which, I don't know, once again is plausible, I guess.
It's plausible, but it's super inconvenient, in my opinion. At least I've never heard anyone driving their kid around just to sort of soothe their earache. I mean, you have been to 2 stores that had pharmaceuticals. Couldn't you just buy something and give it to your kid? I mean, but right, I mean, it's
it gets weird. I mean, it is true. It's
really weird, right?
Yeah, especially I think this was her second time having a child, so maybe she was a little bit less paranoid. I know first-time parents get pretty touchy with their kids and what they give them, and then there's a lot of like a lot of medicines that like would be fine for adults, and you give a little bit to a kid and it might kill them.
Yeah.
So maybe that's. But yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of is I know my daughter, when she was a toddler, there would be certain times of the day and certain places where she would reliably fall asleep and do other things. So
Yeah.
I guess it's once again, it's one of those things where it's like, I do wonder now that you bring it up, if it's one of those things that somebody might stereotype as being a topic that was like out of the wheelhouse of like, let's say, male police detectives or male police officers, which isn't to say there weren't women on the staff, but one of those things that this has happened before. Somebody kind of brings up something that like a feminine hygiene topic or something like that like men right away shy away from or are not too interested in. They're just willing to kind of wave off like, oh yeah, for sure you needed time to do that. And like men aren't usually as involved in comforting tiny children. I mean, these days we are more involved, but yeah, still it might have been like where they're like, oh, okay, well that sounds normal, that sounds plausible. So then after that, she says she went to a local gym and worked out from 12:40 to 1:21. At which point, worked out until about 12:40, I should say, and then she went directly home at 1:21, posted pictures from the science fair of Kyron on Facebook, and then was going to go pick him up from school where supposedly he was. Once again, it's worth pointing out two things. One is she had provided herself an alibi again, and number two, where's the infant when she's at the gym? That's the part I couldn't really figure out.
Oh, yeah, like this is actually interesting that you've mentioned this. Like I've never really thought about it. Where was the infant? Wait, oh no, like I think I know what might have happened. Like gyms have that, like at least back in the day here in Lithuania, I remember when my mother used to take me to like a gym when she would like work out, and she would leave me like at a some sort of like a children's room, and they had like this one person like looking over the children. So maybe that was the case. I'm pretty sure like I'm pretty sure something like that was the case. And another thing, you've mentioned that Terri was about to drive back to school and pick Kyron up, but I believe that was not the case. Wasn't like Kyron supposed to come back home via the school bus on his own?
Oh yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I believe he was, supposed to arrive home at 3:30 p.m. Right? Something like that. But he never arrived home.
Yeah. In fact, it says when they they were obviously pretty concerned when their child didn't walk off of the school bus at 3:30, and they call the school, and the school says, well, no one's seen him since you were with him this morning, and he was in fact marked absent. And at that point, the secretary called 911, which good on her to not wait for the parents to do that. It is, in fact, in a lot of cases by law, the school's job now, because there's been so many issues with child murders and disappearances and abuse and things like that. There's some pretty strict laws now in the United States where the school can actually be held criminally liable if it doesn't ring the alarm bell when there are sort of some red flags going off.
I mean, a similar situation is here in Lithuania, like still to this day, because I believe like the people that are held accountable are actually the teachers. Like if a kid is not at school and not at class, and the teacher doesn't notify anyone, that then sort of she's like, or he's considered responsible if anything happens to that kid. So I mean, it makes sense, it definitely makes sense. Kids tend to do stupid things, so you sort of need to like look after them a little bit. So you
need checks and balances. Plus, the school is essentially responsible for.
I mean, but to that point,
that kid.
But to that point, why didn't anyone in Skyline Elementary School report him missing earlier? Like he did not attend classes. Maybe you wanted to mention this, like, or something like that. But like, why did no one notify like the parents of this kid when he was not in his first class. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, what's that all
Yeah,
about?
it's true because I remember when I was like in high school, this is, back in the 90s, early 90s, at some point, like even way back then, the computer systems were getting synchronized where if you got marked absent in a class, an automated phone call would right away go out to your parents saying, "Hey, your kid's not in school today. Just want to make sure that's what you knew and that your kid isn't ditching class, etc." And I think that happens now for my child's, if she's marked absent, I believe a recording goes out right away saying, "Just so you know, your kid was marked absent today. So if there's some kind of problem, please let us know." I think also to your point, though, it does start to get into like kind of the haziness around school security and how kids are checked in and out. So, on paper, anybody walking out with a kid after like the first bell, let's say after the beginning of the day, um, that there should
Yeah.
be some sort of process to make sure that they're actually checking their kid in and out. So I don't know, unfortunately, enough about the school's policies or how that worked. I can tell you that in reality, there's so much that goes on back and forth that like, I've walked onto the campus of my kid's school without anybody spotting me, and even gone into like other rooms to go give like gifts to my kids' friends that my wife asked me to do, things like that. Nobody even stopped me. Like, for instance, I walked into the after school program and nobody said, hey big man who's walking through a whole ocean full of children, what do you want? So,
Right. Yeah.
knowing that I wasn't one of the parents because they would have known me by then. I'll also point out, conversely, though, a long time ago, when I was a Boy Scout, I was in high school, and we'd done a special project for a school. And as part of the follow-up for that, I needed to talk to the principal at this elementary school. I went there during a school day during lunch, and the principal was not in the office. She was out walking around the kids. So the principal's staff told me to go walk out and find the principal, which turned out to be the totally wrong thing to say because the principal was not happy about that. And it took like about a minute for me to explain to her, like, look, your staff told me to come out into the school campus and find you. That's on them. But
Yeah.
I will say that I was very noticeable in that case. So in that example, a big man walking around, right away the kids are like, "Oh, who's this guy?" Like, it was a stranger. It was very weird to them. So I think it depends on the circumstance. I mention this because one of the theories presented by Terri about what happened to Kyron was that there was a suspicious man in a white pickup truck who was seen pacing and muttering and acting strangely at a nearby 7-Eleven. And her theory was this guy is an obvious suspect, and somehow he wandered onto campus and abducted this child. I think from that point of view, I say it is plausible depending on how the school monitors how children go in
Yeah.
and out.
Yeah.
But it's also very much not plausible if it's the kind of school that has its stuff together. If that
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely makes sense. What you just said. Like, another thing is like Right. So continuing with the story. So basically, at 3:30, Kyron is not at home. Not he does not come back home at this point. So the police is called, and I believe that's pretty much the whole like brief introduction to what actually happened, right? So that's just like the basis of the story. I don't think anything of note happened on that day, right? On what was it, June 4th, right? So that was like we've covered every single like important detail that happened on this day in particular, right? Of course there are a lot more details that we're going to get into right now about like what happened after the fact, but did anything else interesting happen on that day?
I feel like that's it. I mean, it went
Right.
we're kind of the standard script of like the police start asking for help, and the cheerful parents and step parents come up in the press conference and start asking for help from the public as well. But then after this, in the subsequent days, the whole situation starts to erode
Yeah.
into something a little uglier.
Right. So right after like this, I just want to quickly play a few clips that I have, just for our viewers to get a general sense of how things actually spiraled after this initial June 4th day. So Desiree, that you are seeing right now on this picture, she's on the right, and she is the paternal mother of Kyron, and this is Kane, his father. So Desiree actually, for a while she sort of, I guess, she didn't say anything out loud against Terri, the stepmother, that is the main suspect, right? I will quickly jump to the picture, right? See, like, this picture is from the initial, I guess you could say, cry for help to the public, and you can see Terri here on the right and Desiree on the left. And Terri really seems like she's, at least to me, it seems that she's really selling this. It seems like she's selling her emotions. Like, to me, this is like a little overkill. wouldn't you say, Glenn?
Yeah, I mean, at least in comparison to some of her behavior later. So it seems like it went from like very, like a high, like a very sorrowful and anxious, and I don't know what happened to him, and let's find the little boy, to later on a bunch of other things.
Right. I mean, a few days, like, right after this press conference, like a few days, she started sexting, like sending like sexual texts to Kane's, her, then husband's high school friends, high school friend that lived nearby or something like that. And there was like, she went on Dr. Phil, and she sort of was like, I don't know, like, you have to see those clips for yourself to see what actually happened. I mean, it was crazy. Like, to me, that says a lot. Like, the fact that she, like, a few days after the fact, like, if you're this sad and you're this messed up as you seem in this picture, would you start sending those types of texts to like a stranger a few days after the fact, right? It's all.
Yeah,
I just want to mention the fact that it almost seems like she was celebrating at that point, don't you think?
yeah, like it was too much effort to keep the facade up. And before I go on, of course, everything we mentioned is just our opinions. No one has been formally charged with anything, at least not permanently. Everything is alleged, and everything is really just our opinion
of course, yeah.
on the fact. So please, nobody go out and contact this person, or
I mean, I bet
any
people
actions.
have.
Yeah.
I bet people already had. So another thing is, Desiree, the paternal mother of Kyron, she actually 2 years after Kyron went missing, she filed a lawsuit against Terri, and I'm just gonna quickly play a short clip of that.
A major development in the Kyron Horman investigation. As K2 News first reported exclusively last night, Terri Horman is being sued.
Desiree Young, the biological mother of the missing boy, just filed a civil lawsuit against the stepmother. Terri Horman has been a focus of attention ever since Kyron disappeared 2 years ago. Right now, Desiree Young and her lawyer are outside the Justice Center. Let's go there live now.
I want to thank you all for being here and coming together to support Kyron. Your coverage and attention of Kyron's case has been phenomenal. It's been thorough and sensitive, and my family and I really appreciate it. I speak to you today as Kyron's mom from my heart. My Kyron has always been my comfort and my joy. He has always been the one that could tell when I needed a hug. My Kyron has always had such compassion for others that it's hard to not have him here. I miss his laughter. I will forever have a hole in my heart because he's not here. Every time I think of Kyron, I think of his big smile and the way that he would hug me out of the blue just to tell me that everything was okay. My family and I are living through a nightmare most families can't even fathom. Monday marks 2 years of this nightmare. 2 years since my son has been gone. I haven't been able to see my son, hug him, kiss him, or tuck him into bed. Not a day goes by that I don't think of him, or I don't think of anything else that I can do to bring him home. I pray that he will come home to me. I wait for the phone call every day to tell me that he's coming home. I hope that I am wrong, but I fear that he is gone forever. I believe that Terri Horman knows where Kyron is. I believe that Terri Horman is responsible for where my son is. The time has come for Terri to take responsibility for what she has done and to tell me and my family where Kyron is and how he got there. It's been 2 years now. It's been 2 years now, and although I believe that eventually the criminal justice system will take action against Terri, I have made the decision at this time to bring a lawsuit against her. In this lawsuit, I'm asking the court to compel Terri to tell me where Kyron is. I'm also asking for money damages. I do not intend to keep anything that is awarded from this case. Any money that I recover will be dedicated and used for families and parents of other missing children. I don't want Terri's money. I want Terri to face justice. She hasn't yet taken responsibility, and through this process, I hope to compel her to accept responsibility for what she's done. We are hopeful that an award of money damages will make it impossible for Terri to move on with her life. With the support of my family, I will pursue all available legal means to prove that Terri was involved in Kyron's disappearance. I will pursue anyone that helped Terri take my son away from me. I will pursue this with all of my energy until I find out where Kyron is. Until I can bring Kyron home, I will not rest. It's time for there to be answers, and it is time for Terri to accept responsibility. Kyron, we will never stop. We will never give up. I promise.
A major development in the Kyron.
Right, are you still with us, Glenn? So I've just finished playing this clip. So essentially, what Desiree was saying is pretty much at this point, 2 years after Kyron went missing, she started to throw suspicion over Terri, essentially, blaming her that she had something to do with the disappearance of her son. Right, so what's your take on that whole situation?
Yeah, so I think, if I'm remembering correctly, this is around the time that the whole thing popped up on my radar. I think before that, for whatever reason, I hadn't either heard of it or paid a lot of attention, but when you have suddenly the family within a kidnapping case like this, or at least a disappearance, let's say, start turning on each other, especially when you have the husband join with his ex-wife, who is the mother of the child, against his then wife or soon-to-be second ex-wife. That was where it got very interesting and it got a lot more compelling. So, it's worth pointing out there were a bunch of things that came to light in this period that prompted Desiree to take action, and it got to the point actually where she filed a civil suit, which did its own digging into the case and brought up some other evidence, but then eventually she suspended her suit to not get in the way of what is an ongoing criminal investigation. So specifically what we're going to talk about, and we already talked about it a little bit, was the sexting. So unfortunately for Kane, it seems like he has a hard time maybe finding partners in life that he can live with long term. For whatever reason, he seems to have kind of struck out twice. So in this case, it seems that his marriage with Terri was already headed for a bad place. There are allegations of infidelity back and forth, and as well as the sexting, where the person that she was texting with kind of sexually explicit texts, which is what we mean by sexting, was Kane's friend, like you said, from high school, who had come to visit the house. He'd come to visit the house and provide support, and then all of a sudden she's hitting on him pretty hard in these texts, and she goes on Dr. Phil years later and addresses what's going on. Now the timing on that is really interesting. There were two things that people were picking on her about. One was, I think she either went on Facebook or Twitter and made an update a couple days later that sounded pretty casual for somebody that should be agonizing over where is the child that I've been entrusted with in her family.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, she didn't seem, she sort of definitely posed a lot of red flags with her sort of behavior a few days after Kyron went missing, because she sort of, I'm assuming she played along. She played this role of being a sad stepmother, doing everything she can to locate Kyron and make sure that he comes back home safe, and then it's like a 180 switch right after, like a few days. You know what I'm trying to say here? Like she starts at sexting, she's like doing all sort of other weird stuff,
things that do not seem appropriate for either her marriage or the situation, given what's going on, because you would think even somebody in a marriage that is falling apart and that has kind of a lot of he said, she said, anger issues back and forth, it still seems the timing's very inappropriate. And I think this is a key thing to seize on, because this maybe signals to some of the motive and some of the objections that people have about, how could potentially a step-parent do something like this. So just to seize on how Terri explained this away in the Dr. Phil interview, Dr. Phil goes and he points out some of these behavioral inconsistencies, and then he brings out the texts, the sexts that he can even show on national TV at that point, given the rules, because apparently some of what was sent included like naked pictures, things that were just like, that's full bore trying to have an affair at that point. Now she explains it away by saying, well, Kane was doing it too during the same period. That's what she says. She says, I don't see any other documentation of this. She says, right. I mean, she's defending her actions by saying the other person in the relationship was also doing it. So I guess she's trying to say they were both being inappropriate, so that somehow it's a wash. I don't agree. I think what concerns me is two things. One is, yes, the behavior is very inappropriate, but it also, she's saying she was essentially doing it 100% out of retaliation. So she said she did not have any feelings for the person that she sent these would seem very meaningful and certainly revealing texts in terms of showing like naked pictures of your body to it.
Yeah,
stranger
definitely.
You just that, right?
You could just water those down a little bit, just keep it like texts only. You don't necessarily need to send pictures like that. If you're sending those types of pictures, that sort of, at least for me, that sort of, insinuates that you actually want to do something, not just, like, that definitely makes it look like you have interest in that other person, and not just doing it, for the purpose of getting back at someone, right?
Yeah, and what's horrible is, it's like, at this point, her actually being sincere in a way actually looks better for her than her excuse, which is she was 100% not sincere, never intended on delivering on any of the, let's say, promises or offers she made in those texts. She was doing it 100% to get back at her husband, now ex-husband, because she was mad at him. Now, why this troubles me a lot is, let's say that she's telling the truth and that she wasn't having secret affairs or trying to get out of her relationship or find a new relationship, that she was just doing it because she cared so much for her ex-husband that she really wanted to, like, you know, get back at him and maybe make him feel jealous. Well, that is a really short-sighted, destructive way to engage in a relationship with somebody. And to me, that shows that this person is able to let their vindictiveness and their emotions of the moment make them do things that are very unfavorable for them and their loved ones in the future. So you know where I'm going here with this, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
So like, one of the questions is, let's just like walk through this. Let's say let's put ourselves in a fictional scenario here where we put ourselves into the body and mind of Terri Moulton, and let's say she's having a bad time with this relationship with Kane. There's some allegations, which we'll talk about in a second, from the gardener that she had actually asked him to be a hitman to kill her husband some months before Kane disappeared.
Rodolfo Sanchez, right? He was the man.
Yeah, and there's we'll go into that. That's actually one of the parts of the case where I have to kind of take Terry's side again, unfortunately, because of how much that was messed up. But in this, okay, let's do the scenario though. Okay, so she's in this marriage. She's with this guy. She has a baby with this guy, and he also has a kid. So she has a stepkid that she has to take care of, and she wants to get back at him. Now, most people would say, in absence of what we said about the texting, a normal person would just drop the relationship at this point. It's like, hey, I don't like you. Maybe I don't like your kid. Guess what, Turkey? I'm gone. I'm taking the baby. We can have our custody fight over the baby, but like, you can keep your kid. You know, you keep what's yours. I'll keep what's mine. And let's not get in each other's way. But instead, if there's like kind of this ongoing dispute brewing, you know, doing something stupid and crazy and short-sighted and horrible, like doing something to someone's kid, as hard as it is to imagine someone who isn't psychotic or a sociopath doing this, it does make me lean more that direction having seen this. And it's worth comparing, I guess, to other cases like the John Benet Ramsey case, where there was a lot of scrutiny of the parents and their motives and what kind of people they were. And I think ultimately an investigation of the backgrounds and what kind of people the John Benet parents were in that case actually worked in their favor, where, you know, it would have been so out of character for them to have done stuff like that to their own child.
Right. And in this case in particular, you know, Terry doesn't she sort of shoots herself in her leg, you know, with all of this weird behavior. But to that point, I sort of feel like, you know, she was sort of mentally unstable. I mean, that's probably, you know, safe to say. I mean, I'm not saying I know that, you know, 100%, because, you know, this case it has never been proven that Terry had killed Kyron, because, you know, you were alluding to this essentially. So let's just let's just discuss the rest of the elephant in the room already, I guess. So right. So yeah, I definitely get what you're saying. Like the John Benet case, the parents, it would definitely seem completely out of the ordinary for them to do something to, you know, their daughter. But for this person, Terry, who had all of this weird behavior going on in the background of her life, it would seem that it could be possible that she actually, you know, did something to Kyron.
Yeah, I mean, and even comparing once against John Benet, like nothing ever happened from those parents after that case. So like it was pretty much a quiet street in terms of like the rest of their lives. I mean, Patsy Ramsey unfortunately died several years later from cancer, and she'd been suffering from cancer on and off for some years. And
Yeah.
I believe the father is still alive, but neither of them got any legal trouble. In contrast, Terri had some legal problems immediately after the Dr. Phil taping, in fact, where she was arrested here in this state, California. She was accused of stealing a gun from a roommate, and was also accused of driving a stolen car.
Yeah. This is her mugshot, by the way, from like after the fact. You're right.
I can't help but laugh because it's like, yeah, a lot of the photos, she doesn't come off well in the Dr. Phil thing either. Her face she's very defensive. I mean, gosh, on one hand, it's like, bad things happen to good people, and bad things also happen to
bad people,
or people somewhere in between. So, I mean, this person could be literally having the worst decade of her life. And boy, wouldn't that be awful if, some random crime did happen, just like with the Ramseys, where it looks like somebody had victimized them. Wouldn't it be awful if you were some kind of semi-borderline person with maybe emotional issues, psychological issues? You struggle to get into relationships, struggle to keep them together, and then kind of all the usual aspects of your behavior come out, and then like if just by chance something happened to this kid that was under your care, that would be pretty awful. Sometimes the losers do keep losing, but yeah, it doesn't look good. If it's worth covering real quick, two other people. So we already mentioned the gardener, and what's unfortunate about the gardener is the gardener made these allegations, but it looks like kind of similar to the Boulder, Colorado case of John Bonet. Once again, you have kind of a smaller police department that maybe doesn't have as much practice with cases like these, and sort of doesn't necessarily have all of its ducks in a row, or does things that potentially pollute the case. So what I'm referring to here is there are allegations that look like they may be substantiated, that there was some sort of impropriety in the way the prosecutors of this case, or at least they're trying to gather evidence for a prosecution, that they may have used some leverage on the gardener to either testify and or participate in a sting to try to get Terri to implicate herself. But they use leverage that I would say, at the very least, is unethical. So the leverage I'm referring to is he claims that they threatened to deport his family, which right away from a couple levels, that's really problematic. It's problematic because like most law enforcement lean heavily the other direction from ever dealing with sort of the documentation of immigrants, because this goes back. Sorry, go ahead.
Because you've really started covering in detail this Gardner situation. I was just thinking I would just quickly give a brief rundown on what actually happened in that situation, so that our viewers would get a better grasp on what actually happened. So in late June 2010, in the midst of the investigation into Kyron's disappearance, Kyron Horman, the father of Kyron, was informed by investigators that Terri had offered their landscaper Rudolfo Sanchez a lot of money, that was the quote, to kill him. So Sanchez testified in a deposition that Terri approached him to help kill her husband in January 2010, 5 months before Kyron's disappearance. But when Terri's attorney, Stephen House, asked if Terri asked him to kill her husband, he said no. So essentially, Rudolfo Sanchez essentially stated that yes, Terri did offer him a lot of money to kill Kyron Horman, but then after Terri's attorney asked him that question, he said that no, Terri did not offer me money to kill Kyron. So that's just the brief rundown. Like I didn't really understand that situation that well. Maybe you have some more intel on that.
Not much. I mean, I tried to dig into it. I looked at some of the articles that link to it. It looks like at some point a judge ruled basically in favor of using parts of his testimony, but for him not to be able to be cross-examined. It was a really weird ruling. I would say just just to be neutral on this,
Yeah.
to me, it's almost worse than a wash, because it's like, okay, he's been caught lying one direction or another. He's making allegations that the prosecutors or the police have been putting pressure on him, including, deporting his family, which right away gets into a whole other territory that's very problematic. But yeah, I mean, I think just from a point of view of seeking out the truth, this looks like sort of the prosecutors lost sight of the goal. They started caring more about winning than it was actually getting to the truth, or they thought, right?
As they do on most of the cases, right? So this is, by the way, this picture is of Cain and his son Kyron. So right after Cain was informed of this basically information that Terri potentially was out to kill him, he moved out immediately, right? So he moved out, and he took his and Terri's daughter Kiara with him, because he was basically awarded full custody of his and Terri's daughter. So at this point, Terri was left essentially with no one. She was all alone after that information came out.
Yeah, and once again, that's like where it gets a little bit complicated, right? Because you do feel sorry for a mother who wants to be with her baby, and it's a really strong bond, and then to have them separated for any period of time during that, it's like a no-win situation for both of them, right? Because for Cain's point of view, well, this lady maybe tried to have me killed, obviously doesn't want to be in a relationship with me anymore. We'd have made a baby. You want your baby to have good parenting and to be close to her biological mother if that person's still in your life.
I mean,
what a mess.
But maybe not to this biological mother. You know what I'm trying to say? She's like, man, like, I know it sounds like really messed up, but like, yeah, I actually wouldn't want, like, I believe Kiara is still living with Cain, right? She's not living with Terri.
Yeah, I'm not sure, because it seemed like there was a custody battle back and forth, and I think that was also when I started paying attention to this, because once again, it was just such an ugly thing, and just another disturbing angle of the case. Yeah, I think she may still, especially given her legal problems since then.
Exactly, like she has a lot to deal with, I bet. Yeah.
So then the only other person we haven't really mentioned yet is Terri's friend, Dee Spicker, or I don't know how you say that last name. Spiker. I'm gonna say Spiker.
I believe it was Spiker. Like I haven't really found that much information on her, so maybe you have something here.
Yeah, everything is unfortunately like secondhand, so it's all through kind of mentions in these articles. It would have been nice to be able to find some case paperwork, but I think because everything's still on hold, even this long later, they don't have it. So just the thing that was suspicious was her friend was also a landscaper or a gardener, and her friend disappeared suddenly from work, so had to suddenly leave work the exact day that everything happened. Her friend had to suddenly leave work, and they suspect that she was helping Terri in some way, if Terri was in fact doing something sinister. And there's also an allegation that she provided Terri, that Dee provided Terri with a burner cell phone. So what I mean by that is a cell phone that you pay with cash. It's considered disposable. There's not really any record of it. It's prepaid cell phone, and you could make all manner of phone calls and not really have that traced back to you, because it's kind of like you're walking around with a payphone in your pocket.
Yeah. I mean,
so that that sounds really bad, right? That sounds like Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad.
Yeah, like that definitely sounds really, really weird, and given the fact how much evidence, not like hard, cold, concrete evidence, but like these little minor details, they really do add up against Terri. Like there's so much.
So even after all this, I guess what's amazing is this investigation is still going on. You still have supposedly grand juries secretly being sequestered and evidence being presented. You have Desiree making announcements like in 2018 that something big was underway and about to happen. So it looks like people have set her expectations that something might move forward with some kind of prosecution. And given that we haven't been asked by the police or anyone else to consider anything else, like they seem, so this is where it's similar to the John Bonet case. The police seem to have a very definite point of view that they are not straying from about who the most likely suspect is and where they should be focusing their attention.
Right. Exactly. Another interesting thing that we sort of have not mentioned yet is the fact that Terri actually failed 2 polygraph tests. That was insane to me.
Yeah, I'm more on the fence about it because I keep on hearing so much mixed stuff about polygraphs and how they're administered, and I guess apparently, I'm glad you mentioned it because John Douglas said that as part of his capacity for advising the John Bonet Ramsey family, he said he would have told them not to ever take polygraphs because, especially so soon after the event, it was just unpredictable what someone's baseline.
Yeah, especially with their whole mindset, and psychologically people are probably not 100% after something like that happens. So I would definitely have to agree. I have this quick little clip to play from Dr. Phil's interview, so I'll just quickly play it.
There's been a lot made of the fact that you've taken 3 polygraphs, and that the polygraph operators have reported that you failed the first 2 polygraphs and that you walked out in frustration on the 3rd before it really got going. And you've said that the first polygraph seemed to be kind of a normal protocol. The second one seemed like a hurry-up job, that they didn't really do half of what they did on the first one.
Right.
And the third one was very frustrated, and you didn't actually do it.
So the first one was approximately an hour long, and reading the results took about 3 hours to do it. I'm very hard of hearing, virtually deaf in my left ear, so I have to look at people when I talk to them to understand what they're saying. He was behind me when he was doing the first polygraph. So it took me a little bit of time to process what he was saying to respond. I was gone for the 3 hours while he put it together, came back, and I don't even know what was up on the screen, but he said, "You failed." And I was like, how can I possibly fail? I told the truth. And then they came in, 2 of the, Bobby O'Donnell, lead investigator, another guy named Will, he's an FBI guy, he was part of the group, and were talking to me about it. And after discussion of it, I was upset. Went back, and I had, at that time, called Kane, and I told him, I'm just done cooperating. I have had it. I cannot believe that they're focused on me, or they're not focusing where they need to be. And they took me home. I was at home. The lead investigator of FBI, his name's Lee Gossam, he called me over to the school or the fire station and asked that we have a discussion and about saying that they needed my help to continue on because I know Kyron as well as I do. Excuse me, I agreed that I would. I just said, I'm just angry because of all this is going on. He said, well, had you had any other reaction, I would have thought that you were guilty because I don't feel that way about you. The second polygraph was, the guy was in a rush.
Well, how much do you rely on reading lips?
It's heavy enough. I have to see the context of the person, what they're saying, their facial expression. It helps a lot.
You had your back to him?
Yeah, if I'm sitting this way and I'm doing it, he's right here at a table. So I can hear out of this ear. It's just, it makes it much more difficult.
Mm-hmm. Well, we spoke to Jack Tremarco, who does a lot of polygraph work for us. And he said that it's very possible for hearing to affect a test result. He said, definitely, if you have a hearing problem, it's very possible that it would affect a test result. I consider him to be the best of the best. He said, but in the pre-test portion of the polygraph, questions are reviewed and it is established that the questions are understood, and that it should have been established that she wasn't hearing well before the test was given, if that was a problem.
I told him that. I told the polygrapher that,
And he still got behind you.
yes. I told him I couldn't hear. Then he made it so that I was scooted over enough that I could hear more out of my right ear.
Did you hear the questions?
I did, but it took a minute to get them.
What
So-
did he ask you?
One of the questions was Kyron in the truck with you? Well, there's a fail right there, because he was in the truck with me on the way to school, but not when we're leaving. So that one I can't even get right. And that was the one that I supposedly failed.
He didn't ask you if you
Didn't ask me if
you
I
knew
murdered my son.
where he was?
He did ask if I knew, what? Do you know who has him, or, yeah, do you know who has him or where he is? But the one that was failed was whether or not he was in the truck with me.
Right. So yeah. So basically, her main I guess excuse, or like how she explains failing those polygraphs, is the fact that she's almost deaf in her left ear, and the polygrapher was standing behind her, and she apparently needs to see people's lips to understand the questions fully, or like to get them in her head faster. So that's her main reasoning for failing those polygraph tests. I mean, you know, it sort of, I guess, makes sense. I'm not discarding her like statements or anything like that. Like it's plausible, right?
Yeah, it's plausible. It was the one part of the whole interview where Dr. Phil seemed to be taking her side a little bit. I mean, the rest of the time, I laugh because it's like, if you were her lawyer, would you have told her to do this interview? Like, does she come off well in this whole in the whole interview?
Not really.
Yeah,
right?
right.
Yeah, like it's a weird move. It's a weird move. Like I would probably try to lay low. You know, the thing is, maybe her lawyer maybe knew that something was going to happen either way, and she sort of needed some sort of publicity, and a platform to, you know, state her piece of the story. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
It's weird.
It all becomes admissible in court, so it's, you know, there's usually when people do this, it's because the court case has already happened, and there's legal protection called double jeopardy in the United States, where, like, if O.J. Simpson came out today and said, "I killed Nicole," he couldn't go to trial. Like, that trial's done. They already said he didn't do it. Same for the civil case. That's over. But, like, she's not protected by any of that. There's still a pending civil case that's been suspended. There's still this pending criminal investigation. So here, I have a question for you. So, I mean, how plausible do you think the scenario is that, you know, she, for whatever reason, wanted to get rid of Kyron, you know, out of vindictiveness or whatever? And so I guess the idea would be she went and coordinated things with this friend. Maybe that's what the burner cell phone is for. The burner cell phone is to tell the friend, and who knows how long this was planned ahead of time. I don't know if it was like a spur of the moment, like the friend didn't know, that Dee didn't know, you know, that this was going to happen, or if suddenly she's like, oh, I got it. Because you'd think she would like cancel work the day before or something, right?
Right. I mean, finish what you were saying, because you were going to ask me like a question, right?
Yeah, so I mean, how plausible do you think it is? I mean, for I don't want to stereotype, but two women. So usually people think of men being more able to do something cruel and horrible, like kill a child. Women aren't often identified as being so cold-blooded, especially with a child that essentially is their family member. So how plausible do you think it is that she went and either planned this ahead of time with Dee or spur of the moment, either way, called Dee somehow, either on the burner phone or something else? It makes you wonder how she had the burner phone when that burner phone was provided. Says, hey, something bad happened. I need you to hide something from me. And then if Dee or whoever did this, gosh, the mob should hire them, because they had the biggest search for a missing person the state of Oregon had ever had, and no one's found anything.
Yeah, I mean, to that end, I think a few things to mention here is like, so basically Terri essentially raised Kyron, you could say, because she was raising him since like he was 2 years old. So it sort of, at least for her, it should have, like, she should have developed some sort of attachment to the child, right? So it would seem really strange if she would just, out of pure vindictiveness, just would kill Kane's son, because Kane was allegedly texting or having an affair. I mean, Kane had an affair while he was still married to Desiree, right, when she was pregnant. So Kane was probably a guy who could do like cheatings and things like that. So he may have cheated during that period, but to kill a kid just because of that, I mean, it's really, I don't know, man. It just seems like a little too much. And the fact that this Didi person, this friend of Terri, like how good of a friend do you have to be to just basically get a call and your friend says, I'm going to kill my stepson. Can you bring me a burner phone and maybe help like cover my trail? Like this is insane. Like this is insane. Like, wait, do you think that Didi was also connected to the actual murder, or was she just
disposal?
Yeah, like, do you think like she was in on it, or was she, or did she just buy the phone and think nothing of it?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, part of me really wants to lean towards the latter, that she was just in a what's the word I'm looking for, like an accomplice, or that she did.
But that's crazy. But that's so crazy. Like, you don't even know the kid, so why are you involved? You have nothing to do with this.
You have essentially a scenario where these two middle-aged women,
potentially psychotic.
Yeah, potentially psychotic, but otherwise, other than this, not a lot of like records of anything. you have both of these women having to act like hardened mobsters from a movie like Goodfellas or something. Like that's what's so crazy about it, and that's what I think, where any kind of doubt creeps into my mind that maybe it is, maybe there was just some weirdo and like somehow he just slipped in like a ghost into this school and abducted this kid, and now kind of these other unfortunate characters have to take the blame. I mean, I feel like there's still some room for doubt that maybe that happened, but because of how cold the crime would have to be, you could understand other things, like even the John Bonet thing. If you thought the parents did it, has like some plausibility underneath where they wouldn't have to look like monsters.
I mean, in John Bonet, like, if you're gonna bring back the John Bonet case, like, I like personally what I'm going with John Bonet is that the brother sort of accidentally killed John Bonet. So right, so that's my like main take on that case. So yeah, I think that I'm sort of leaning towards that theory, but who knows, like that case in particular, like I have no idea of what actually happened. Like, I don't have, like, the intruder theory could also be a possibility, definitely, but like in this case, in this particular case, I'm sort of leaning towards Terri, that Terri probably did it. Obviously, I would like to mention this one more time, that I'm not stating that she did it, I'm just stating that I think she did it. You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't know for sure, but the fact that she had legal troubles after the fact, she stole a car, stole a gun, she had a boyfriend, that the boyfriend stated that she tried to cut his throat or something like that. Have you heard about that? Like, she had yeah, like I've
oh my gosh.
Right, so she had a boyfriend, and that boyfriend, after they split up, I guess, stated that she tried to kill him, and the stolen gun from the roommates, also the fact that she was caught drunk driving prior to Kyron's disappearance, right? So she seemed like a real reckless woman who it would not be too out of the question for her to do something like that, especially for, say, if let's say Kane does have an affair and this person finds out about it, and the type of person Terri was at that time, maybe she decided that this is a perfect way to get back at Kane, because Kane really loved his son, right? He definitely cared a lot about his son, and Terri knew that, so that would be a perfect way to get back at Kane. So from my research, I'm definitely leaning towards the fact that Terri actually had something to do with Kyron's disappearance. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the one factor that really leans in favor of that, besides just all the other aspects of this person's personality, were just the fact that she seems to be able to do things without thinking about what her future self will have to deal with. So like a normal person, anybody can feel angry about something and feel vindictive and want revenge and say, oh, I'd really like to do XYZ to that person. But then you think the rest of it through and you're like, okay, that'll feel good for a second, but then I'm going to spend the rest of my life paying for that, going to jail, going to court, blah, blah, blah. In this case, this person doesn't seem to factor that kind of stuff into her decisions.
Exactly,
stealing a gun or a car.
Exactly, it almost seems like all of her life is like, sort of her life motto is, let's do it and then think about it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like every single part of her life that we know about has been like that. Going on Dr. Phil, like, I mean, if you really think about it, did you have to go on Dr. Phil? Or texting those messages a few days after, when you know damn well that those messages will come out to light. You know what I'm saying? Like, why are you doing all of these things? It seems like she doesn't have foresight, for her own well-being. She doesn't have enough foresight, but then again, she's it seems that she's really lucky because she's still a free woman, you know what I'm saying? And it seems like she's always tiptoeing around that line where she gets to go to jail,
Yeah, I mean, I keep wondering if maybe at some point a skeleton will turn up in the woods, because for all the effort searchers put into stuff, and I know they obviously put their heart into it. There was a case about Casey Anthony where there was a woman who I'll point out was found not guilty, or there was a hung jury, I think, in the was not guilty in the state of Florida. This is kind of an outrageous case because the way the mother of the dead child acted was just reprehensible, and the character of this person in that case was even worse than the person here by a long stretch. But what was interesting was eventually the body of this woman's child was found in a park that was I think within a mile of the home. And what was really obnoxious about all that was this was just some random cable guy who just was on a smoke break or just by the park and just kind of poking around the woods and comes upon a skeleton, and had to go way out of his way to get people to take him seriously and finally come and collect the body that they were all looking for I think more than a year. Meanwhile, this was a park that supposedly had been searched multiple times, yet when they went and examined the body and did the postmortem, etc., they're like, oh no, this body's been here the whole time, since the child went missing. Yet all of us missed it. So that that makes me optimistic that maybe, sadly, if he doesn't turn up alive somewhere, with some other family, they shipped me to some other country, and now I'm living in Bratislava. No, that you know,
right.
this poor kid. But the kid was old enough to know that he was who he was and what his name was. So that doesn't seem likely. So yeah, I mean that would have been the charitable thing, right?
Right.
Like, at least just get him out of their lives. But instead, yeah, I keep on thinking someone's going to stumble on him in the Oregon woods.
Yeah, I mean, so essentially, like, I feel like both of us are ruling out of the theory that Kyron actually walked out of the school on his own merit, and he just sort of, I don't know, ran away or something. Like, we're probably ruling that out, right? Because I feel like if a 10-year-old runs away from home, he's definitely gonna be found. You know what I'm saying, like, or some sort of a sign, or like a body will be found. So to me, it definitely seemed like Terri probably picked him up like right after she took the photo. I feel like taking off like this photo was essentially like the beginning of her scheme to form a good alibi for herself, right? So she probably takes this photo, maybe like, I don't know, half an hour or something like that passes, and there's still like an hour and like 15 minutes until the first class starts. But she says to Kyron that you forgot something at the truck, and let's go back to the truck, or something like that. Kyron then goes to the truck, and essentially, right, it's really hard to say what happened after that, but I'm leaning towards that. I mean, she probably killed him, but how? Like, how would she do that? You know what I'm saying? Like, with what? With like a gun? She couldn't have used a gun. That's way too messy. I mean, but like, to her, I mean, not to her point, but like, I think you could agree that there's a lot of hiding places where you could hide the body, right? Around like this rural Portland suburb. There's a lot of like woods, right? Like, if you wanted to hide someone, I think you could fairly easily hide someone so good that no one could actually find where that person is, right? So these woods are crazy. Obviously, she probably didn't hide the body. If she killed Kyron again, she probably didn't hide the body like right next to the school, right? So let's imagine something. There's a lot of like forests and open fields where she could have done it. Also, you have the river, what's it called? The text just keeps getting smaller, whatever, right? You have this river right here, so I mean, there's a lot of places that she could have, hid the body, right?
Yeah, and then Oregon is so cold and wet and humid that anything left out, even buried, would probably decompose pretty quickly. So if they ever do find Kieran's body, it's going to be probably a lot of like DNA testing and dental records and things like that to make sure it's the right person.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's just super humid.
Yeah, I mean, from dental testing, you could pretty much identify anyone these days, because a 10-year-old kid definitely has a dental record. So yeah, I mean, I think personally, we're going on like almost like an hour and 20 minutes now, so I'm feeling like it's about time to wrap up the show. I mean, from my end, I feel like I've mentioned pretty much everything I wanted to mention. Maybe we've left something out, or maybe there's something that you want to talk about.
No, I think I've expressed what I would like to express on it. I mean, once again, this is only our opinion, so I don't think that anybody should, definitely shouldn't be reaching out in anger to any of the participants. But yeah, we're really looking forward to seeing what else comes in this case. The police definitely haven't forgotten about it. Kieran's parents have not forgotten about it. So what we hope is that if anybody has any information about this case, please speak up to the relevant authorities, as well as us. We'd like to hear about any updates. We've had some interesting updates to some of the other topics we've talked about in the past that we'll probably cover in a future show. But we're looking forward to your opinions, and of course, please subscribe.
Yep, so I think that's it from us, guys. We're signing out, so definitely catch our episode next week. And yeah, if you have any more information on this case, leave a comment down below. And this case is still open, it's not closed. People are still trying to actively find Kyron, or at least to find out what actually happened to him on that night, on that day. So yeah, it was a pleasure talking to you, Glenn, on this topic, especially because you seemed like you had some really interesting points to basically cover. And yeah, I guess this is it from us, guys, and we will catch you on the next episode. Stay safe and peace out.